Hello everybody, it's Glitter Informer. In this episode, at long last, Sora, Mashiro, Tsubasa, and L are headed back to Skyland. The king and queen are as delighted as you'd expect to have their baby girl back. Well, almost. The king gets the short end of the stick here, because not only do the other three crash land right on top of him when they first teleport to Skyland, but also Elle flies over to the queen for a hug while completely ignoring her own father. Also, when Elle shows her parents that she can walk, whom does she walk to and whose lap does she fall into? That's right, her mom's. Also, since everyone knew in advance that Elle would come home, there are massive crowds gathered at the castle cheering at seeing their princess back. Man, these people really love having a non-democratic government, don't they? After the crowds disperse, there's this weird shot where the king and queen are moving, but the animators didn't have time to animate Elle, so she's just sitting completely still and staring into space. It's pretty creepy. Animation errors aside, the king tells Sora, Mashiro, and Tsubasa that they can go to their homes now and leave Elle to him and his wife. But the gang tells him that they'll continue to lend them their power as pretty cures and do the right thing to the very end. And then, a woman named Captain Shalala comes into the room. Yeah, I know, it's a stupid name, but believe it or not, it isn't the stupidest name in this episode. It turns out Captain Shalala is the person who saved Sora in the evil forest all those years ago. She's also the leader of the Azure Guards, a team of heroes who protect Skyland. So, why weren't they there to save Elle from being kidnapped? The show actually has an explanation for that. There were a bunch of fires in another part of Skyland, so the Azure Guards were taking care of that. Sora runs up to Shalala and hugs her. She even blushes while doing so. I'm surprised that Mashiro isn't jealous at all, given all the ship tease between her and Sora previously. Speaking of Mashiro, she and Tsubasa now have Skyland clothes. Their new clothes look really similar to their old ones, but they're just different enough that they don't stick out among the other Skylanders. We find out that off-screen, the king offered the trio anything they wanted in exchange for saving Elle. Mashiro doesn't ask for anything because she's just like that. Tsubasa asks to be able to continue staying by Elle's side to protect her, and Sora asks to join the Azure Guards. So now, Tsubasa is Elle's official babysitter, and the rest of the episode is about Sora being part of the Skyland Hero Squad. So, Sora introduces herself to the other guards, and we meet this huge jerk who does have the stupidest name in the episode. Her name is Berry Berry. Between her, Captain Shalala, and Elle with an extra E at the end that isn't even pronounced, I'm starting to wonder if the people on Skyland are on drugs with all the dumb names they come up with. Anyways, Berry Berry is immediately opposed to Sora joining the group's ranks. First of all, she says that Sora's just a kid, which is rich coming from somebody who looks no older than her. Second, she says that Sora might be lying about saving Elle, which is a terrible conspiracy theory. There were multiple people there back in episode 1 when Sora ran through the city to chase after Kabaton and save Elle. If anyone asks to verify Sora's story, there will be plenty of eyewitnesses. Berry Berry's also skeptical of Sora having gone to another world, which is stupid because the people of Skyland are perfectly aware that portals to Earth exist. Several people, like Yo-Yo and Tsubasa, have gone through them. The king and queen themselves saw Sora and the others going through a portal from Earth with their own eyes. There's no way Sora is making this up when there's so much evidence. Finally, Berry Berry says she doesn't want a weakling to join their group, even though there is no evidence to imply that Sora is weak, and, as I discussed now, plenty of evidence to suggest that Sora is strong. Rather than bringing up any of the mountain of points that I just brought up, Sora instead says, "Alright, if you think I'm so weak, then test my strength." So, Berry Berry and Sora have a duel. Berry Berry uses a magical gauntlet, while Sora, who is given a choice of any weapon she wants, chooses none. Well, except that she throws a sword at precisely one point in the duel in order to block one of Berry Berry's gauntlet's energy blasts, but other than that, she chooses no weapon. The fight goes pretty well for Sora, and it's well animated to boot. Unfortunately, Mashiro, who is watching, screws everything up by calling out Sora's name, which distracts her long enough for Berry Berry to hit her with an energy blast, electrocuting Sora. Fortunately, Sora is able to shrug off being electrocuted, and she wins the duel anyways. After her victory, Sora tells Berry Berry that it doesn't matter who's weak or who's strong. What matters is doing the right thing. Except this makes no sense. Sora wouldn't even be in a position to lecture Berry if it weren't for her proving that she was stronger than her by winning the duel. What's more, it's only because Sora is so strong that she was able to save Elle and get into the Azure Guards in the first place. If it really didn't matter who's weak and who's strong, anybody at all would be able to join the Azure Guards, but that's obviously not the case since, counting Sora, there are only 12 Azure Guards in the entire kingdom. Rather than bringing up any of these points that I just came up with, Berry runs away crying because she can't deal with being wrong about the girl she harassed being weak. But who cares about that moron? Sora goes inside and gets her official Azure Guard uniform. We find out from Sora telling Mashiro that, as it turns out, the reason Sora left her hometown to come to the capital of Skyland was so that she could join the Azure Guards. She didn't know how she was going to persuade them to let her in, but then she spotted Kabuto kidnapping Elle, and the rest is history. There's this pretty sweet scene where Mashiro cries with joy after seeing Sora in her uniform for the first time, and Sora reflects on how many coincidences led to this moment, from Sora just so happening to see Elle getting kidnapped, to Sora just so happening to meet Mashiro. The girls decide that Yo-Yo was right. It really is fate that brought them together. They agree to be best friends forever and ever. Best friends. Sure. Later that day, as Sora's about to go home and get some rest, Shalala tells her that when Berry was little, she injured her arm, and it caused her to fail the test to join the Azure Guards for 3 years. However, after putting in more work than anyone else, she finally earned her spot on the team. So, after seeing Sora get in without even having to pass a test, it understandably made her upset. She cares so much about who's strong and who's weak because she's had to prove herself to not be weak her entire life. Sora remembers her speech to Berry about how it doesn't matter who's weak and who's strong, and says that she said a terrible thing and has to go apologize. What? I mean, I get wanting to forgive Berry and start things over fresh with her, but apologize? Sora literally did nothing wrong. It was Berry who antagonized her from the start. Sure, her motivations are understandable, but it's no excuse for the way she treated Sora. If anything, Berry is the one who needs to apologize. Even Shalala says that what Sora said to Berry after the duel was something Berry needed to hear. But Sora doesn't listen and runs off to apologize to poor little Berry. We then get introduced to our new villain. Well, technically he first appeared in the opening theme of this episode, replacing Kabuto, but this is his first time appearing in the story itself. His name is Batamonda, and he's a handsome guy with long green hair, eyeliner, a spiked leather jacket, a bare midriff, and tight, ripped jeans. So, naturally, the Pretty Cure fandom loves him. Honestly, this fandom can be really shallow sometimes. Tons of people on the Pretty Cure wiki hated Kabuto before the first episode even aired, just because he was a fat, cartoony pig man instead of a handsome bishy or a cute girl. They literally knew nothing about him other than his character design, and they'd already decided he sucked based on just his looks. Meanwhile, this guy comes along and gets no such reaction. I think we should be judging characters by their, character, not their looks. But anyways, Batamonda is kind of interesting so far. Not as interesting as Kabuto, but he's still got an okay start. Kabuto was boastful and reveled in how evil he was. He was so over the top in his enjoyment of hurting others that he was instantly memorable. Meanwhile, Batamonda puts on a facade of caring about the suffering of the weak, at least until he goes and talks about wanting to destroy the world. Also, even though he's smug and is convinced that he's stronger than everybody else, he's way calmer and more relaxed than Kabuto in his high-octane antics. Anyways, Batamonda turns Berry's gauntlet into a Ronborg. I'm honestly disappointed with the way the Ronborg is designed. See, every Ronborg that Kabuto created had a purple mohawk because Kabuto had a purple mohawk. So you'd think that the Ronborgs created by Batamonda would share some physical characteristic with him, right? Maybe they'd have Batamonda's distinct teardrop shape that he has painted under his right eye with eyeliner. But no, the Ronborg in this episode has a mohawk, even though Batamonda doesn't have one. Sure, it's a green mohawk instead of a purple one to match Batamonda's green hair, but still, it's disappointingly lazy. Also, Berry is instantly knocked out. For all the Azure Guards' hype, they sure are easy to beat into a pulp. Batamonda even calls Berry a weakling and says that because of that, he won't hurt her because isn't he so kind? Meanwhile, Kabaton loved to hurt people he saw as weak and made no effort to hide it. These two villains really are foils to one another. It's interesting. So, the fight begins. Not only do the Cures have to fight the Ronborg off, they have to protect Berry because Batamunda says that even if he has a policy against attacking weaklings, the Ronborg doesn't. Wing flies circles around the Ronborg to distract it, but it doesn't work for long and he gets punched off into the distance. Sky then punches the Ronborg, but it blocks her punch and sends her crashing into the wall. The only one unscathed is Prism because she's able to attack from a distance. Berry then regains consciousness and tells the Ronborg to stop. It responds by trying to pulverize her into berry jam, and Batamunda says that it's so sad that she's so weak. Fortunately, Sky blocks the punch just in time and shouts that Berry isn't weak. Except she kinda is, though. She couldn't do anything whatsoever against the Ronborg, but the Cures could. She literally is weak compared to them. Sky takes this opportunity to apologize to Berry for going off at her when Berry was suffering alone and had worked so hard. Again, Sky did nothing to apologize for, but whatever, the show doesn't care, so why should I? Also, Berry instantly realizes that Sky is Sora. Sky throws the Ronborg's hand off her, and this causes the Ronborg to topple over. Sky and Prism then finish it off with Updraft Shining. Then we get a pretty interesting character moment for Batamunda. After his Ronborg is defeated, he starts screaming and throwing a fit, but then he catches himself just a second later, laughs, and congratulates the Cures on putting up a good fight before teleporting away. After the fight, Shalala comforts Berry while she cries, and Sora goes to return Berry's gauntlet to her. However, Mashiro stops her and says that they should let Berry be for now. This is another good character moment. Sora has shown herself to be impulsive, wanting to go out and correct all wrongs as soon as possible. However, Mashiro is more cognizant of social situations than Sora, and she knows that Berry's not in the greatest mood right now, so she needs to be left alone. But right as Sora, Mashiro, and Tsubasa were about to leave, Berry runs up to Sora, thanks her for saving her, and apologizes to her. Sora hugs her, and the two are now friends. With that, our episode ends. Our cameo cure, by the way, is Cure Flora from 2015's Go Princess Pretty Cure. I've heard that that's one of the best seasons of the show, but I haven't watched it yet. I should probably get around to that someday. Anyways, I'm mixed on this episode. It was mostly good, but what holds this episode back is its morals and themes. The main thesis of this episode is that it doesn't matter how strong you are as long as you do the right thing. But even though it tells the audience this, it shows the opposite. Because Berry is weak, even though she wants to do the right thing, she can't do anything because she's completely outclassed by the Ronborg. The only people who actually do the right thing in this episode are the strong ones, the Pretty Cures. Berry does absolutely nothing constructive in this episode. All she does is insult Sora and then become a damsel in distress for the Cures to save. So how strong a person is actually does matter, one heck of a lot. Speaking of Berry insulting Sora, I also didn't like how Sora felt a need to apologize to Berry. Between this episode and episode 12, it really seems like Sora, for all her physical strength, has no backbone whatsoever. People will mistreat Sora however harshly they want, and she'll think that she's in the wrong for some reason that God only knows. And aside from one line from Shalala, the show does nothing to portray this as a bad thing. I understand that teaching forgiveness is a good thing, and I do think that Berry should have been forgiven. But there's a difference between forgiving someone and blaming yourself for their actions. Stuff like this is going to be hurtful to the kids watching the show. Sometimes children are mistreated by other people in their lives, and it's toxic to teach kids that it's their fault that other people are hurting them. But other than that, there were a lot of good things about this episode. The animation for both fight scenes was better than usual this time around. We also have an interesting new villain who's an intriguing foil to our previous one. On top of that, we got nice character moments for Sora and Mashiro, as well as more world building for Skyland. I really look forward to seeing what the next two episodes do to further flesh out Skyland. Well, that's it. See you all next week!